Do you want to write a compelling story for your players? We'll be talking about this and more today on Beyond the DM Screen.
This is Beyond the DM Screen. Roll initiative.
From the start of humanity, we have tried to make stories. And now that you want to play D&D or DM D&D, you have to ask yourself, how am I going to make an engaging story for my players? I'm going to give you a few tips, a few tricks that you can make an engaging story that your players want to continue playing. First off is world building. Work with your PCs. Your PCs are going to give you so much information if you ask them to give you backstories. And pay attention to those backstories because they will give you great little nuggets of information. Even if they're small backstories, you can find something. My paladin, she gave me a small backstory about how she came to her faith. And it was obvious that she was looking for the approval of her god. So I made her god a very stout man that is constantly demanding of her, just constantly asking her to do things. But as you work with these players, you will get these amazing stories, these arcs. My monk that used to play with us, she gave me this terrible backstory about how, because of her half-elf heritage, she was persecuted and her family was killed. She was the only survivor to her knowledge. I asked her, did you have siblings? She said, yes, I had a sister. 2 sisters, one older, one younger. I'm like, cool. Who are you closer with? The younger one. And so I ran with it. Sigmund Freud talks of this uncanny, this topic of the uncanny. And so which means you take something that's familiar and you make it somewhat unfamiliar. So it's still familiar, it's still something that we recognize, but it's twisted. I took the sister. I made her evil. The sister somehow survived. The sister survived by dark powers. And so when the monk finally ran into her sister, it was still her little sister, but evil, twisted, sucking the souls out of passerbys, out of everyday civilians in this town that they were in, just devastating them and devastating the monk because that was her little sister, someone that she was attached to. But now she sees her in a new light. This evil light makes her uncanny, spooky, terrifying. So work with your players. Make these stories. See what drives these players to be what these players are, or the PCs what these PCs are. And then when you finally have all this, you can start thinking about your villain. If your players are chaotic, or if your players are methodical, react to that. If you can tell that they're that way in their backstories, react to it. If not, wait for a second. But you need to think about how your villain is going to be. Is your villain going to be this methodical planner like Thanos that has this evil means to an end, or an evil end but is trying to do something good? Or is it this Joker that just wants to kill everything and everyone? For example, my villain in this campaign, Rose, the goddess of nature. She is this methodical planner that has everything planned down to a T. And yet my players are this chaotic mess that somehow always foils her, and it frustrates her. It gives her more reason to want to kill the players. So find this balance. See if the players are chaotic and they're trying to fight chaos, or if they're methodical and trying to fight chaos, or chaos versus chaos, or methodical versus methodical. React to your players and develop your villain in this way. That way your villain can be a thorn in the player's side, and your players can be a thorn in the villain's side. And now that you have your villain, you have your players, you can create a general story. You can plan out the arcs of your story. You don't have to plan out the specifics just yet. When you get to that arc, yes, you should probably start planning out specifics. But just have a general idea of what you want to happen. Think, okay, my players are trying to do, I want my players to get to here? How am I going to get to here from this arc? So for my case, my players are trying to get to capture this goddess. How are the players going to get to capture this goddess and bring her to justice? Okay, so there's these arcs that they have to do. And each arc will influence them and lead them towards this. I'm not saying railroad your players. Let your players make every decision. But just have this general idea of the arcs that will happen. Plan it out. Just think, okay, so the goddess is going to do this, and the players can go here, here, or here. And just have this general idea of what you want to happen. Never force your players to do anything. And this leads us to the beginning of your campaign, session 1. Or sometimes you need session 1 and session 2 to hook your players in. We'll make this analogy to fish. When you're out fishing, sometimes you get that immediate bite and you can just yank them in. Sometimes you need to cast out your line and slowly taunt the fish. That way the fish comes up and eventually bites it so you can hook it. Or you have to cast it out and just sit there and sit there and sit there. I've had all 3 of these different type of hooks. So I started a campaign with Drungo, my friend, and my cousin and his friend, that eventually just led to being the PC Drungo. And eventually Drungo merged into my other campaign because they were inhabiting the same world. Drungo's campaign was very much so immediately hooked, let's do this, because from the very beginning, an assassination attempt at a party that they were at on a prince of the kingdom. And boom, they were sent out to investigate because the police force can't do some of the things that a civilian or a vigilante could do. So the captain of the guards asked them to investigate, and boom, immediately hooked, because they're out there, they're already starting to figure things out from the very beginning. Now for the campaign that Drungo was integrated into, it was a cast line out, and I slowly taunted the players for the first couple sessions. They were asked to escort a caravan, and they get attacked by some goblins. They go investigate this goblin's cave, and they realize that the person that had hired them and that would pay them had been captured. So they go and they investigate where their employer is. And they come across an evil that they can't understand. And an action sequence happens where they have to make wisdom saving throws, or they will all be empowered or dominated by this evil. The wizard's the only one that saves on the saving throw, and he's running away from his friends, just trying to snap them out of it, and eventually does. And after I slowly taunted those players for those 2 sessions, they got hooked, and they are ready to play, and they are ready to dive into the story. And then the last one was, I casted out the line and I waited. This is my most recent campaign. They are in a school of Hogwarts. They go into this school, and for the first session, I do a slice of life episode with them. They experience the school for how it is. They enjoy it. They figure out who the teachers are. They figure out everything, essentially about the school, about how their class schedule is going to be. And a couple of the players were like, okay, this is a little weird, but like, we'll give it one more session. We'll figure out what's happening. And then the second session, boom, a teacher's critically injured. They see a shadowy figure, and they receive a mysterious letter at night that tells them to meet by a pond at midnight. They sneak out of their dorms to go to this pond, and there is the shadowy figure standing there, telling them to kill the teacher. If not, bad things will happen to the school. The players have this moral complication, this moral objection to killing a teacher, but they also don't want bad things to happen to the school. They decide not to kill the teacher, and bad things started happening. One of their classmates falls from the ceiling, from a rope, boom, dead. And a letter lands. And all it says is, I told you bad things would happen. And it changes to a note that would not seem anything suspicious. It seemed as if she had ended her life. And boom, I hooked in the players, and now they're invested in the story. And at the end of your campaign, you have to have a satisfying wrap-up. You've had your beginning, you've had your plans, you enact your plans, you plan more specifically as your players get to the arc, and now you need a satisfying wrap-up. Work with your players on this wrap-up. See what their PCs would want. For example, Drungo, he has been working against this goddess of nature, even though he believes that humanoids aren't doing great things to nature. He also believes that there's a better way to do it than just killing everyone. And so he's been working as a counter operative against this goddess, and little by little he's starting to become godly. And so we're working, I've talked to the PC, the player of this character, and we've talked about it, and we said, what if Drungo becomes the replacement of Rosé, as he is clearly a better candidate than she is. So have a satisfying wrap-up, work with your PCs, and then you'll have this amazing story that you and your friends will look upon years after and say, I had so much fun playing D&D. I wish I could go back and play again. So in summary, world build with your PCs. Have a good villain to counteract your PCs. Plan, but don't overplan. Have a good hook at the beginning and have a satisfying wrap-up for your players. Now, always, thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe, like, and notification bell. I'll see you next time.